So the first topic is, of course, the High Court case in the UK, which I'm going to scroll down to it. If you want to see the summary given by the court, that is also at the very bottom of the link and agenda, that the linked agenda in the description of the stream. I do apologise, I'm tired. So you can also read the quick summary there as we go along. For those who don't know, two claimants took the High Court up, Quincy Bell and A. A is the mother of an anonymous child, and they were arguing that minors, so under 16s, could not consent to puberty blockers. Now, this relates to, in particular, the Gillett competence. Those who don't know what the Gillett competence is, it's a precedent of medicine which states, quite simply, as a matter of law, the parental right to determine whether or not their minor child below the age of 16 will have medical treatment terminates if and when the child achieves sufficient understanding and intelligence to understand fully what is proposed. Now, this law came about this precedent, I should say, it's not really a law. This precedent came around in 1985. There was a woman by the name of Victoria Gillick who took the NHS and various clinicians to court over the prescription of contraception, arguing that doctors, by prescribing contraception, were effectively pressuring children into engaging in sexual conduct. And since they were minors, big hoo-ha there. The court said, well, that's ridiculous. However, there is a question about, can a child understand fully the impact of contraception? And that's where the Gillett competence came up. They pretty much said outright that there are no real parental rights when it comes to medicine. There's a parental responsibility to cover for the ignorance of the child. Once the child has an understanding of the medical procedure or the drugs they're taking, that's it. It's out of the parent's hand. Full control is given to the child in that regard. And this has been the medical standard when it comes to minors ever since. It's been applied to all fields, and subsequently was applied to puberty blockers when they started to be given to minors. Claimant A is the mother of a 15-year-old child who is afraid that their child might be referred to Tavistock and Portman, which is the clinic that primarily deals with trans children in England, whilst Quincy Bell is a detransitioner. Now, the interesting thing about Kira Bell is that she's been seen as relevant in this case. She is the main witness and the main point of argument behind all this. She is a 23-year-old who went on blockers age 16, so beyond the point of medical consent in the UK, which is 16, started HRT age 17, and had a double mastectomy age 20. This is someone who was considered an adult by all medical standards. Later on, they regretted what they went through, and since then they've decided that they're going to spend their time attacking the very medical precedent, which had no impact on their life whatsoever. Now, sorry, I'm just reading my notes quickly, 1 second. Now, the court case was presided over by Dame Victoria Sharp, Lord Justice Lewis, and Mrs. Justice Leven, who decided that a child being considered for puberty blockers need not only display an understanding of their medication, but that they also needed a full, in-depth understanding of both HRT and surgery. Now, for those who don't know, the whole point of puberty blockers which do exactly what they say on the tin, is to delay the partially reversible process of puberty to give potentially trans youth the time to learn about HRT and surgery, to work with professionals to explore their gender identity, and to decide whether or not they want to continue down a medical route. Puberty blockers are a safe medication. They are entirely reversible. Before they were used on trans children, they were developed and used for decades on cis children who go through precocious or early onset puberty. So, like, again, all they do is pause puberty. If you remove them without HRT, natal puberty sets in. If you remove them, the child is on HRT, then the desired puberty will take place. There are concerns that it might have long-term effects on bones. Those concerns have never been substantiated in any of the studies into the medication whatsoever. And it's strange how these concerns only become relevant when the same medications which have been used on cis people for decades, cis minors specifically, are suddenly being used on trans people. Sorry. Do apologize. Now, why do they make the call? Some people say that the courts were conflating HRT and puberty blockers. I personally disagree with that. Reading the actual summary and the arguments made, what seems to have happened is the courts seem to have conflated correlation with causation. You see, the current GPs are so careful with who they prescribe puberty blockers to that almost all of the people who go onto puberty blockers go on to further medically transition. And almost all of those, almost all of those go on to be completely satisfied with the process. It's actually one of the... It's a procedure which has among the highest satisfaction rate of any medical procedure out there, and in any just world, this would have been seen as a resounding medical success in, hey, there's definitely not been this influx of people who are going to detransition as the fear-mongering goes. The courts did not see it that way. The courts decided that since almost all those who go on puberty blockers go on to HRT and later surgery, that proves puberty blockers cause people the desire to go on to HRT and surgery. That's at least what I got from my reading.
Can I just take a moment to interrogate the reasoning behind that for a second?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so two things jump out at me about that. First of all, the idea that puberty blockers could cause someone to be trans. They must believe that somehow something chemically about the blockers changes the way your brain works.
Mm-hmm.
That changes your gender identity. That's the only way it can make any sense. And I don't understand how that's supposed to work.
Which is weird because it didn't do it with precocious puberty.
Yeah, it doesn't do it with precocious puberty. And also because just physically, in order for that to happen, puberty blockers would have to mess with your brain chemistry. It doesn't really do that. All it does is block hormone receptors so that the testosterone or estrogen your body is producing isn't getting received. I don't understand how that is supposed to change your gender identity, especially considering all the things that have been tried to change trans people's gender identity, which have not succeeded. It's very weird logic.
And that's the thing. That's the problem with these are people who have no medical understanding, who are ruling on something that, they really have no business ruling on. Our first stream we did, one of the stories we ran is how the British Medical Association, which I think has 196,000 medical professionals and I think 36,000 medical students under it, it's the UK's medical union, supported the use of puberty blockers under Gilead competence guidelines. So like, this is the medical institution of the UK supports the practice, but the court completely ignores that and just says, well, quite clearly puberty blockers cause people to be trans, is effectively what they say.
Yeah, it really highlights a problem with the court system in general, is how people who have no fucking idea of what they're talking about can just make decisions for an entire demographic in the country, just like that, against the medical consensus. But the other thing that jumps out at me just now is, even if we pretend they're correct, that going on puberty blockers does make you become trans, does it matter if those people are happy?
That's a fair point.
It shouldn't matter.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I'll let you in on a secret. A secret no one knows is the only reason they care is because they hate trans people, and they want no one to be trans.
They offered.
That's
go on.
That's a big secret that no one watching the stream knows about.
Specifically, the reason I'm saying that this seems to be the case is they offered 8 points that a person who is being forwarded for puberty blockers is expected to have full comprehension of before they can be allowed. So I'd just like to go through them. Again, the summary can be found at the very bottom of the agenda, which can be found in the description of the stream, so if you want to read it yourself, you can do so whilst I go along. It's point 4 in the summary, two sentences in. The first point are the immediate consequences of the treatment in physical and psychological terms. That's always been the standard. That's nothing new. That's the whole point of Gilead competence. You understand that puberty blockers cause puberty, which, considering that the people who want to go on puberty blockers are people who are showing distress as they start to go through puberty, because I should be clear, puberty blockers are not given before puberty sets in. It's given in the late. It's given after puberty.
Between standard changes 2 and 3.
Yeah, between 2 and 3. And the reason they do this is to allow the psychology of the mind to definitely develop the parts of the brain responsible for identity and sexuality, because they develop very early. So they actually allow a level of puberty to go forward. Oh, I believe we have a donation. Robert McCallan donated $4. Thank you, Robert. It's very much appreciated. So yes, that's very basic. Okay, point 1 we can agree with. Point 2, the fact that the vast majority of patients taking puberty-blocking drugs proceed to taking cross-sex hormones and are, therefore, a pathway to much greater medical interventions. Now, this is bullshit for multiple reasons. For a start, this is where the whole equating correlation equals causation comes in, but also, if you're worried about young people feeling pressured into doing something, the last thing you do is tell them that this is what everyone else does in their situation. Can you say peer pressure? I don't get why they forward this. This has no impact on the individual and their well-being. So that was point 2. Point 3.
It's also just kind of ridiculous because, and I lost my train of thought. It's ridiculous because even if this is a trend, even if you do your study, you get your little vials and pour the chemicals like a real scientist and do your study and find out that 99.99999% of people who go on blockers go on to other kinds of transition. No one is forcing these people to go on to other kinds of transition.
Yeah.
It doesn't prove anything. It proves less than nothing. Why would you tell someone doing this thing that you can stop at any time forces you to do this other thing? It doesn't do that. I I know I'm just belaboring the same point, but it's just so.
Point 3, the relationship between taking cross-sex hormones and subsequent surgery with implications of such surgery. Again, that sounds like point 2 just sort of reiterated. Number 4, the fact that cross-sex hormones may well lead to a loss of fertility. All of these aspects will, be discussed when the person reaches that age. In most cases, the standardized pattern for people who go through this is most of them are prescribed puberty blockers sometime after 12 years of age. They go on HRT when they reach 16. They are then on HRT for at least 2 years before undergoing surgery. So again, 16, they've already reached the age of full medical consent. So the only reason for barring the person at that point is if there is a demonstrable reason to believe that the person is incapable of making that choice and there is an active risk of harm. Extreme cases. That is the only justification at that point. So when they go through these stages, they will go through that additional checking. It's not a case of you're on puberty blockers, okay, you can go on HRT without further inspection. They will go through another process, and the same for surgery. So again, this whole repetition, it has no basis. The impact of cross-sex hormones on sexual function, that's point 5. Again, what relevance does that have to puberty blockers? Point 6, the impact that taking this step on this treatment pathway may have on future and lifelong relationships. And I don't know if any of those of you who are listening realize that what that is kind of echoing. This is the same sort of argument that's very often used to argue against hysterectomies, for example. Oh, well, what if your future husband wants to have a child, etc.? It's quite literally it's prioritizing a potential relationship in the future over the immediate health of the individual.
Not just a potential relationship, but a potential relationship with someone who clearly has no regard for you.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's going to be angry at you for making a decision for your health before you even met them, then they're not the sort of person you should be in a relationship of any kind with.
Yeah, it reminds me of what my dad said, oh, you should hide your bisexuality because certain people are if they hear bisexuality, they're just gonna they're not gonna be willing to date you. It's well, you do realize bisexual people have the highest rate of domestic violence and spousal rape of any demographic out there, and you're quite literally saying I should hide it to fool someone who has a negative perception of bisexual people. No care for any of that sort of thing.
Being respectable matters more than being in a relationship with someone who actually cares about you.
Number 7.
Actually, sorry. Yeah, just this point we're talking about also reminds me of part of my transition. I had to talk to a fertility specialist. And this, I promise I'll make this quick. This fertility specialist kept trying to ask me, what's your sexuality? Who are you in relationships with now? Who are you going to be in relationships with in the future? And I kept saying, why do you need to know any of that to tell me how my fertility is going to work if I do this?
Mm-hmm. And
at one point, I kept calling her out and she kept pushing the point. And at one point she said, I need to know what sort of genders of people you're interested in so I can discuss fertility options that they have that don't involve you in any way, shape or form. And I'm like, what are you talking about? If it doesn't involve me, it doesn't matter what I do with my body.
Mm-hmm.
There's just this huge thing where if you want to transition, there's this hyperfixation on everything related to reproduction and making sure that your transition is okay with whoever you're going to do that with, even when it literally has nothing to do with it. It's so weird.
It just teaches people it just teaches trans people that cis people have dominion over their bodies.
I mean, that's why they do it. It's because they believe that they have a say in what we do with our bodies, even when it literally, like demonstrably, even when they admit it has nothing to do with it. Because trans people are not real people.
Wait till you hear point 7. Get this. They've got to give informed consent of to children, like demonstrate them so that children have an understanding of this, of, and I do quote, the unknown physical consequences of taking puberty blocking drugs, end quote. How do you impart the unknown information? Like, I get what it's trying to do. It's trying to say, oh, these speculated possibilities, that have never been demonstrated, which, spoiler alert, isn't a reason to block medications which have been used on cis children for decades and have been applied to trans children since.
Imagine if any other surgery or any other medical intervention, you had to consent to undemonstrated, speculatory, unknown dangers.
Mm-hmm. It is just ridiculous. Like, they know they have no actual argument or reason to make, so they literally have to slip that in. It's just, at this point, they have to ask people who go into surgery, hey, you might have someone place a bomb inside your chest or something. We can all speculate. It doesn't mean anything.
I understand if they were saying, oh, this is a fairly new treatment. There are things we might not know about. There are risks that we can't tell you about that you're taking. But one, that doesn't apply here. And two, that's not the same as expecting you to understand those unknown risks.
In fact, is what we know from the limited studies I have seen on assigned female at birth who go on puberty blockers, is it actually preserves their potential for height and bone growth, bone density. So it actually gives them the increased ability for that. So, again, all of this, it's just fucking ridiculous.
Not to mention, fear-mongering about height is really... I understand worrying about bone density, but worrying about height is a weird one. As a short king, I do not approve.
Last point, number 8, that they have to be aware of. The fact that the evidence base for this treatment is as yet highly uncertain. No, it's not. The British Medical Association disagrees. The American Pediatric Association disagrees. No, it's not. Like, they're taking that there's no evidence that there are long-lasting side effects of puberty blockers as evidence that there's not enough research into the long-lasting side effects of puberty blockers. They will not stop hunting until they find what they are looking for.
This is a perfect example of beginning with a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize that's what they're doing, all of this just makes perfect sense. Is, being trans has to be dangerous because they don't like it. And if you can't find any reason that it's dangerous, it means you just didn't look hard enough, and you need to look more, and you need to assume there's some sort of unknown, undiscovered problem with transition. Because the possibility that transitioning is actually completely fine is just not allowed.
I mean, the whole success of the whole thing, in any just world, that would have been taken as a positive thing, Oh, there hasn't been this epidemic of overprescribing a medication. But no, that's been totally turned around 180 and used as an argument against the medication.
It's
could you imagine if a cancer therapy had a 99.99% effectiveness rating, and then a court came along and said, well, that proves that, it pushes them on to further medications and stuff.
It's the whole, I have an invisible dragon. Oh, can you show me? No, it's invisible. Can I listen to it? No, it's inaudible. Can I throw flour on it and then I'll be able to see it? No, it's impermeable to flour.
Yeah. it's just yeah, they can only argue from like ignorance, like, oh, we don't know everything. Yeah, well, how
It's
about we stick to
transphobia
what we
for
do know?
gaps.
So yeah, I should probably get back to what they actually argued. Pretty much, the court has come out and stated that under 16s likely will never be able to consent to puberty blockers. Point 5 of the summary states that, quote, the court considered that it was highly unlikely that a child aged 13 or under would be competent to give consent to the administration of puberty blockers. It was also doubtful that a child aged 14 or 15 could understand and weigh the long-term risk and consequences of the administration of puberty-blocking drugs. No other country agrees with that, no medical establishment agrees with that, but that's what the court decided. This is why so many people, everyone under 16 currently in England and Wales, is being stripped of their access to puberty blockers until they can go to court and try fighting things there. Sorry, 1 second again. I do apologise about the coughing. And I just realised that I did unmute myself. Good. I was worried I hadn't unmuted myself on the stream. But what's really surprising is point 6 of the summary, which states that, quote, in respect of young persons aged 16 and over, the legal position is that there is a statutory presumption that they have the ability to consent to medical treatment. Given the long-term consequences of the clinical interventions at issue in this case, and given that the treatment is as yet innovative and experimental, the court recognized that clinicians may well regard these as cases where authorization of court should be sought before starting treatment with puberty-blocking drugs. So this point is strictly referring to 16 and 17-year-olds, and the courts are stating very plainly that the healthcare professionals should consider seeking court permission to continue with the treatment, even if there's no reason to doubt the person's competence, if there's no reason, no extreme reason to think that, hey, this person cannot make this call, they still should refer to the court. And what this is effectively the High Court telling them that if there is a case where, things mess up, etc., you are now liable. It's a threat. It's a threat, very much, is what it is.
Linda Danvers and Goza the Gazarian very eloquently pointed out that these concerns about fertility, sexual pleasure, these are not brought up when intersex children are quote unquote normalized. It has nothing to do with concerns about people's well-being in regard to these things. It is about making people fit into a cis-normative gender binary.
Very much
Cis-normative gender binary, I added that on. But yeah, that is a very good point.
Yes.
This is just about controlling people who are different.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, something I realized is that so many of these concerns seem to be based on the idea that the only healthy life you can live is a cis-normative one.
Yes.
If you're living as a trans person in any way, shape, or form, it doesn't matter if you're physically healthy, it doesn't matter if you're psychologically healthy. The fact that you don't fit into cis-normativity must mean that down on the line there's going to be some sort of problem. Maybe you're going to have regrets. Maybe you're going to meet someone who doesn't accept you, who you should for some reason have a relationship with anyway. It's very reminiscent to me of the way autistic children will be subject to painful conversion therapies because the idea of living as autistic is just unconscionable to holistic people.
Speaking about autism, it did come up during the case from what I've heard. The courts asked Tavistock how many of the people they see were autistic.
Oh God.
They didn't have an estimate. They said it's on each individual case file. And the High Court effectively said, well, this is something that needs to be looked into,
No.
legitimizing
Oh.
that. When I read this, the point about 17 and 18-year-olds, I was worried about religious abuses. It's practically a way that the far right or certain religious groups can like deny care on religious grounds. But then I've actually read the NHS guidelines, which came out the day this went out, and they state that, quote, for patients who are aged 16 to 17 years, the legal position is different. So long as the patient has mental capacity and the lead clinician considers the treatment to be in the patient's best interest, and there is no parental dispute about the intervention, treatment may proceed. So even if you are at the age of full medical consent in the UK, which again, 16, get to 16, you have full medical consent if you're a cis person, parents have the right to veto you. These are not the court guidelines, these are the published guidelines by the NHS. So, this is england.nhs.uk document. It's in the it's on the point which says under 16s are being stripped of their support in line with court orders. Parental dispute is also grounds for stopping treatments under 18s. There's the link there, you can click it, you can see all the amendments. But yes, parental dispute is ground to halt a 16, 17-year-old's medical process, something which does not happen to cis people at all. This is why the This is why the thumbnail for the stream states that the High Court has ruled trans people second-class citizens, because we do not have the same rights under this ruling. I just don't know. You reach a point where it's just, absolutely fucking absurd.
And now they're trying to use autistic people's status as second-class citizens to hurt them as well. And it really makes me angry as an autistic person, this idea that we can't know what we need. Because here's the thing. I've grown up with a lot of abuse and a lot of neglect. And I had to learn as like a very young teenager, we're talking like 14, 15 years old, how to take care of myself, to not only to stand up for myself, but also just to recognize when people are being abusive entirely by myself. And yet there's this idea that I can't know what I need. And they seem to be they're doing this as well, just with trans people in general, this idea that we can't know what we need, which just doesn't make sense when you consider that the whole thing of being trans, the way it works is you realize on your own and you insist really hard to everyone around you, this is how I am, this is what I need. It's just so completely backwards.
And like, to point out, Kira Bell, the one of the claimants, the one who was 23, went on puberty blockers at 16, HRT at 17, double mastectomy. Was it double? Double mastectomy
at 20.
Age 20. Again, nothing to do with the fucking case at all. Posted a statement in which she stated that, quote, "This fight is not yet over. I would like to personally call on professionals and clinicians to create better mental health services and models to help those dealing with gender dysphoria to reconcile their sex." End quote. They are openly advocating for conversion efforts. It's not even being fucking subtle about it. Like, this is the end goal. Raising the attempted suicide rate for trans youth from 8% to 57%, going by the Trevor Project. That's what the high courts have done. They have effectively signed the torture for every trans youth in the UK, and for some of them, their death certificate. That's
State,
what they've done.
state-enforced torture, and children will kill themselves because of this.
Like,
something I've been thinking about a lot is how I've dealt with, suicidal ideation because I wasn't forced to go through puberty because of anything like this. I just didn't know what being trans was. I didn't know blockers were an option. And the effects of that puberty have caused me to struggle with suicidal ideation to this day. It has taken me 7 years of incredibly hard work to try and become comfortable with my body. And recently, I've got to a point where some of the time I feel genuinely comfortable. Most of the time I feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I will spend days thinking about how my life isn't worth living and how I should kill myself. And that is what you would be forcing on trans children with this rule.
Yeah. It's just... and like, the history is never going to they're never going to face consequences for what they've done here. That's like, we're already seeing it. We're seeing parents, we're seeing youth. There was a 17-year-old who, waiting list 2 years, appointment cancelled. Others who are on medications, cancelled. And they just don't know how to cope,
I'm not even thinking about consequences. I'm just thinking about the fact that this could even happen. That, like, 1 or 2 dickheads who happen to be judges or whatever, who have no understanding of the topic, who have made no effort, none at all, to try to understand the topic, get to sign the death warrants of thousands of children in their country. Imagine if being qualified as a judge gave you the right to just walk up to children and murder them in cold blood. And that's what's happening.
There are, we're talking about this, there are efforts already to fight the case. So, like, it's not over yet. I've heard there's 2 legal cases being brought by specialized social justice legal group. I forget their name right now. I'll scroll through my Twitter and see if I could find out about them, but like right now I'm not being able to focus on that. Amnesty International UK and Liberty have come forward and challenged it, pointing out that the ruling is absolutely absurd, has no basis, is based on absolute fear-mongering, etc. But, like, it is the end of a long and shitty road these past few months, We had the whole gender GP scare, a while back. Thankfully, they managed to keep their supply lines open and everything from what I've heard. But now something has actually happened, which has just knocked every trans minor out of the system. At least for England and Wales. I should note this does not apply to Scotland, and I'm assuming it does not apply to Northern Ireland, so don't quote me on that. I know it definitely doesn't apply to Scotland, though Scotland have had to publish publish stuff saying we will not be taking clients from England and Wales. So, it's just... And honestly, it makes you feel powerless,
Okay, apparently the BBC used selection bias to say that treatment for trans people isn't life-saving because GIDs report very little suicidality in their patients, which, that sounds like something they would do.
That's survivorship bias. Literally defined as survivorship bias. Those who use our services have better mental health. Well, the ones who don't have good mental health are the ones that don't have access to the services.
Hey, Did you know that people who use mental health services have better mental health?
This
This
is-
proves that mental health services don't work.
Fucking hell. Like, God.
This stream is just going to be both of us slowly going into a murderous
Yeah.
rage, isn't it?
Something slow about it. I mean, at what point does it go from, we're fighting for our rights, we're trying to do it like March of Progress style, to let's just fucking get rid of the fuckers because they're coming after the children. Like, that's what they're doing, Civility breaking the fuck down. Like, they fucked with the system. We've tried playing fair. Puberty blockers are not like what we want. They're what we do to placate the fuckers, right? Oh, to give them 4 years longer so they can make this cool. Almost all go on to fucking HRT. Why not just put them straight on HRT? But
with the blockers, they fearmonger. They fearmonger about, going on puberty 4 years late is going to cause these horrible psychological effects. Okay, let's put them straight onto HRT. No, you can't do that. That's dangerous.
Oh,
There's always some way to interpret whatever we want to do as dangerous. And we have, 57% suicide rate staring us right in the face. That's not dangerous. Don't have to do anything about that, do we?
And here's the thing, with this fucking ruling,
lockdowns don't work because the spread of the virus is very slow during lockdown. That is an excellent point.
One thing about this ruling is if a fucking minor could demonstrate competence on HRT and surgery, the logical conclusion from that, based on the Gillett competence precedent, is not to put them on puberty blockers to delay HRT and surgery for 4 fucking years. It's to put them on HRT and surgery. That's what the Gillett competence fucking is. But yeah, they just don't fucking care. And as a result,
but they do care. They care a great deal about forcing every single child to be cis.
As a result,
that's the game here.
People are going to die. I should also
children
note
are going
the
to die.
Facts that,
a lot of children are going to die.
1 second.
Parents are going to have to watch their children slip into depressions and kill themselves.
This isn't fucking theoretical. We know this is the case. The Trevor Project report last year showed us just how fucking damaging this shit is, and they just don't fucking care. Multiple studies have shown puberty blockers, life-saving medications. They just don't fucking care. Fact is, it's not just trans people that are going to fucking suffer from this in the long run. One of the lawyers involved with the case is Paul Conrath. Now, Paul Conrath is someone who has spent the last 2 decades... Excuse me. Train says hi.
No, Cactus, they don't realize that some people just go through puberty at 18 plus. That would require them to understand the topic.
Paul Conrath has someone who spent the last 2 decades fighting abortion access and contraception use. And now they have legal precedent, at least in regards to minors, to do that. This court case completely undermined Gillett competence. It's practically dead. They may not have stated, we reject Gillett competence, it's no longer a good precedent, but that is what has effectively happened here. Gillett competence has been completely destroyed. The Paul Conraths can now go ahead and use this to argue against contraception use and abortion access for minors. And the thing is, Paul Conrath argues that nobody can consent to these things until, ever. But the ones that support him, like the apparent feminists, argue that no one can make a in-depth medical decision until you're 25 years of age. That's a number I see thrown around all the fucking time.
I have a story about that. Can I tell a story about that?
Sure, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so my friend is like, hey, I'm at this cool church. Come check out the church. It's really cool. I think you'll like it. I've been an atheist for a very long time. I know I'm not going to like it, but I'm like, okay, this could be interesting. I'll give it a go. Church was not fun, but I found out afterwards that they're actually homophobic. I have to tell my friend about this, that he's supporting a homophobic church, especially at the time I was identifying as gay. And I'm like, I want to make sure this is definitely correct before I bring it to him, because he's not going to like it. So I go down to ask them, hey, what are your views on like gay people? One of the things I was told is, and this relates again to the whole blockers make you trans thing, is I was told, you should be really careful about identifying as gay, because what if you find out later that you're not? And I said to the guy, I can just stop. I can just not go on dates with guys. And he's like, no. You have to wait until you're 25. Your brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25. You can't know unless you're 25. I'm like, if I'm wrong, I can just stop.
Because that's the thing, like...
Plot twist, I was wrong. I'm actually bi. And you know what I did? I said, hey, everyone, turns out I'm actually bi. And that was the only thing that happened. It was completely fine.
But
my life wasn't destroyed by identifying as the wrong sexuality for a few years.
People keep going on about the like, oh, you know, puberty blockers leads to HRT, which is only partially reversible. Well, what about puberty? Like natal puberty, that's only partially reversible. But yeah, it's just absolutely fucked. And I think that's about all I really have to say on this topic at this point.
I got one more thing to say.
Go on then.
Back to the whole thing about how children will die because of this. You know how the common thing to tell parents who have just found out their children are trans and are like wondering whether or not to accept them is, would you rather a trans kid or a dead kid? Like, that's the thing you say. Would you rather a trans kid or a dead kid? And they say, well, of course I want a trans kid. Apparently that's just not the case anymore. Not only just for a lot of people in general, but the UK has decided, the state has decided, you will have a dead kid. You're not allowed to have a trans kid. You're not allowed that choice. You get a dead kid.
So I guess...
Sorry, everybody, you can't be straight until you're 25. Absolutely. Can't be straight until you're 25. Can't be cis until you're 25. Except, hang on, you can. Because this isn't about being too young to know and possibly making a mistake. This is about forcing everyone to be straight and cis. This is about forcing everyone to fit into the allo cis heteronormative, peri-allo cis heteronormative patriarchy. Am I missing any? White supremacist, all the other ones, capitalist.
Anyway,
I hate this.
I guess we should probably move on to the next topic. We are an hour in already.